Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Today's topic is one that might seem pretty simple at the first glance.
Yeah.
Truth, but as we're going to see, it can get
Yeah, it really can.
complicated fast. So you sent over some excerpts from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy
Okay.
about the religion theory of truth. And
Right.
just from glancing at it, it seems like philosophers really have to bend over backwards and come up with these intricate schisms
Yeah, they do.
just to try and figure out how truth works.
Absolutely. I mean, it's fascinating how something that we use so effortlessly in everyday life
Yeah.
can become so tricky when you actually try to analyze it rigorously.
Yeah, where do we even begin with something like that?
Well, I think a good place to start is with those instances where our intuitive understanding of truth breaks down.
Okay.
And one of the most famous examples of this is the liar's paradox.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one. This sentence is false, right?
Exactly. That's the one.
I've never quite understood what makes it a paradox, though.
It's all about self-reference and how it creates a logical contradiction.
Okay,
So let's say you have the sentence, this sentence is false. If that sentence is true,
right.
then by its own content, it must be false.
Okay.
But if it's false, then it's actually claiming that it's not false, which means it has to be true.
Ah,
So it creates this endless loop where you can't pin down a stable truth value.
it's like a truth pretzel.
Yeah, exactly. It really does tie your brain in knots.
Yeah, so how do philosophers even try to, make sense of something like that?
Well, that's where the revision theory of truth comes in, or RTT for
For
short.
TT.
And instead of trying to fit these paradoxical sentences neatly into a box labeled either true or false,
Right.
it looks at how our understanding of truth changes over time.
So it's not about finding, a single fixed answer, but about the way that our beliefs about truth, evolve.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How does that work in practice?
Well, imagine you have a bunch of sentences, and some of them might be these tricky self-referential ones.
Okay.
RTT starts with what's called a hypothesis about which sentences are true, and it's not a definitive declaration. It's like an educated guess.
We're starting with an assumption then.
Right.
And then what?
Then comes the revision rule. So the revision rule uses these things called T-by conditionals to generate a new hypothesis based on the previous one.
Hold on, T-by conditionals. What is that?
It sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty simple.
Okay.
Think of it as like a rule that connects a sentence to its actual meaning.
Okay.
So, for example, the sky is blue is true if and only if the sky is actually blue.
Right. It's like saying the sentence is true if what it claims is actually true.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, got it. So the revision rule uses our initial guess
Yes.
and then refines it based on these T-by conditionals.
Exactly. And you can actually repeat this process over and over again.
Okay.
And it creates what's called a revision sequence of hypotheses. So it's like we're zeroing in on the truth, but we're acknowledging that it might be a moving target,
Right. Especially with those sentences that are,
especially with those paradoxical ones.
yeah, they're tricky. So instead of one static answer, we get this dynamic process of revision.
That's right.
It's like watching truth unfold in real time.
It is. Yeah.
That's a cool way to think about it. Do we have an example of this in action?
Yeah, the Stanford Encyclopedia excerpts that you sent have a great example with 3 sentences that are all interconnected.
Okay.
And as you apply the revision rule step by step, some of the sentences eventually reach a stable truth value.
Okay.
Either true or false, but some of them fluctuate and they never quite settle down.
It's like some of the sentences, they're on a road trip and they know where they're going.
Right.
The other ones, they're just driving around.
They're just out for a Sunday drive.
Yeah, exactly. But why would some sentences never settle on a truth value?
That's where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
And we need to introduce a concept that might seem a little mind-boggling at first. Ordinal numbers.
Ordinal numbers.
Ordinal numbers.
Okay, I think we have to save that for part 2 of our deep dive because you've officially piqued my interest.
All right, sounds good. We'll pick it up there.
We'll pick it up there with ordinal numbers.
It'll be fun.
I'm excited.
Yeah, me too.
All right, see you next time.
See you then.
All right, so we left off with this cliffhanger about ordinal numbers
Yeah.
and how they relate to the revision theory of truth.
They're pretty cool.
I have to admit, I'm on the edge of my seat here. What are these mysterious ordinal numbers?
Okay.
And why are they so important for understanding truth?
So it's all about pushing the boundaries of how we think about sequences and stages.
Okay,
Like with regular numbers, we have 1, 2, 3,
right,
and so on. But what if we could go beyond that?
right.
What if we could go beyond even like the biggest number you can imagine?
You're talking about infinity.
Yes, but there's a twist.
Okay,
Ordinal numbers allow us to talk about different levels of infinity.
levels of infinity.
Yeah, it's like there's an infinite ladder,
Okay,
and each rung represents a different stage. So we start with the familiar finite numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4,
right.
but then we reach a special rung called omega.
I'll make it.
It's written with the Greek letter O,
Okay.
and it's bigger than any finite number.
So it's like infinity's starting point.
Exactly, but here's the mind-blowing part. you can keep climbing the ladder.
What?
So there's plus 1, 100 plus 2, and you can even have things like 100 times 2 or a square.
So there's like a whole other universe of infinity beyond what we normally think about as infinity.
It's a whole other realm of numbers.
Wow. Okay, I'm with you. So how do these infinite stages connect back to the revision theory of truth
Right.
and those sentences that never seem to settle down?
Well, remember how RTT creates those revision sequences where we keep applying the revision rule
Yeah.
over and over to get closer to the truth? Well, sometimes it takes an infinite number of steps for a sentence to actually stabilize on a truth value.
Okay.
We might need to climb all the way to stage O or even beyond.
So even after an infinite number of revisions, we might still be discovering something new
Right.
about the truth of a sentence.
Exactly. And it might seem counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but there are cases where our intuitions about truth
Right.
tell us that a sentence should have a definite truth value,
Okay.
even if it never stabilizes at any finite stage of revision.
So RTT with these infinite sequences is a way of capturing those intuitions and like making them precise.
Exactly.
Okay, I like it. So it's like even in the realm of the infinite truth can still have this like solid foundation.
Yeah, it gives us a really powerful way to formalize how we reason about truth,
Mm-hmm.
even when that reasoning takes us through infinite steps and seemingly paradoxical sentences.
It's a lot to take in,
It is.
but I think I'm starting to grasp the immensity of this theory. We've gone from like
Yeah,
a simple sentence about truth to exploring the depths of infinity.
it's a long journey.
It is a long journey, but before we get completely lost in the cosmos of infinity, I have a question. Why is all of this important? What does it tell us about truth itself beyond just the mechanics of how we reason about it?
That's a great question, and it takes us to the heart of what RTT is trying to do.
Okay.
It's not just a technical tool for dealing with paradoxes, it's a way of understanding the very nature of truth.
Okay, I'm all ears. How does RTT change our understanding of what truth is?
Well, it shifts our focus from truth as a static property
Okay.
to truth as a dynamic process.
So instead of asking, is this sentence true?
Right.
We're asking, like, how does our understanding of this sentence's truth evolve as we reason about it?
That's a much better question.
So it's less about the destination and more about the journey.
Yeah, exactly. And the journey can be just as important, if not more so,
Mm,
than the destination. It's through the process of revision,
right.
refining our understanding,
Mm-hmm.
that we come to grasp the truth more fully.
That's deep, man.
Yeah, it's a pretty profound insight.
It makes truth feel more alive,
Right.
more connected to how we actually think and reason.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, if truth is this dynamic process,
Mm-hmm.
does RTT offer any clues about what makes something ultimately true?
Right.
Or is it just about the process itself?
That's a really interesting question. And the excerpts you shared actually delve into this.
They do.
Gupta and Belknap, the philosophers who developed RTT, suggest that the meaning of truth, its signification,
Okay.
might actually be embedded in the revision rule itself.
So the process of revision is actually part of what it means for something to be true.
Yeah, it's a pretty radical
It
idea.
really is. It challenges our traditional view of truth as like this fixed and objective thing.
Yeah, but it's incredibly insightful. The way we use truth in our lives
Right.
isn't just about declaring things true or false.
Right.
It's about justifying our beliefs, responding to challenges,
Okay.
and constantly updating our understanding of the world.
So it's a living concept constantly being shaped by our reasoning and our interactions with the world.
Exactly.
I like that. But before we go any further down this rabbit hole of truth,
Yeah.
I think we need to address something. Is RTT the only way to understand truth and handle these paradoxes?
Right.
Or are there other approaches out there?
That's a good point. There are other theories that try to tackle these mysteries of truth.
Okay.
And one of the most prominent alternatives is three-valued logic.
Three-valued logic.
Three-valued logic.
I've never heard of that. What is that?
Well, it's an attempt to deal with those tricky paradoxes like the liar sentence by introducing a third truth value besides true and false.
So instead of just two options, true or false,
Right.
there's a third possibility.
Exactly.
Like neither true or false.
Yeah, like acknowledging that some statements are inherently problematic
Okay.
and they can't be neatly categorized as either true or false.
I could see how that might be useful.
Right.
So how does RTT compare to this three-valued approach? Are they friends or foes in the world of truth theories?
Well, they definitely have different ways of approaching the problem.
Okay.
RTT, as we've been discussing, focuses on the process of revision.
Right.
How sentences either stabilize or oscillate as we reason about them. It doesn't actually assign a truth value to the liar sentence itself, but it analyzes the reasoning process that it triggers.
So it's more about understanding the dynamics of the paradox
Right.
rather than giving it a definitive answer.
Exactly. Three-valued logic, on the other hand, would assign that third truth value,
Right.
neither true nor false, to the liar sentence, effectively saying it's inherently problematic and can't be classified.
So it's like putting a special tag on those paradoxical sentences
Right.
to acknowledge their unique status.
Exactly.
So it seems like we have a choice between RTT's focused on this process of revision
Yeah.
and three-valued logic's attempt to expand the very definition of truth.
That's a really fundamental difference.
It is. It's like a clash between a more conservative approach and a more radical one.
I like that analogy.
But which approach is better? Does RTT have any advantages over three-valued logics?
That's what we're going to talk about next.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like both sides have some strong opinions on this.
Yeah,
But if I'm being honest, I'm kind of leaning towards RTT. It just seems more elegant.
I see that.
You know, staying within that familiar framework of like classical logic, but still being able to account for these crazy paradoxes.
Right.
So does RTT have any specific advantages over the three-valued approach?
Well, you're right to be drawn to that elegance, and you've hit on a key point of debate between these theories, Gupta and Belknap.
Okay.
The main proponents of RTT argue that three-valued logic actually stumbles
Okay.
when it comes to handling certain types of negation.
Okay, help me out here. What do you mean by types of negation? I thought negation was pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Just the opposite of something.
It seems simple on the surface, right? But language is full of subtle shapes of meaning.
Okay.
Think about the difference between saying, like, it's not raining
Okay.
and it's impossible for it to rain here.
Okay.
Those are both negations,
Yeah.
but they express very different levels of certainty and possibility.
I see what you mean. So are Gupta and Belknap saying that three-valued logic with its like true, false, neither framework
Right.
can't really capture those nuances?
Exactly. They argue that RTT, with its focus on the process of revision
Right.
and how sentences stabilize or oscillate,
Yeah.
is more flexible and it better reflects our intuitive understanding of negation and all its complexity.
It's like RTT has a wider range of motion.
Yeah.
So it can handle those trickier cases where just slapping on a label of neither true nor false
Right.
doesn't quite cut it.
Exactly.
Okay. But even if RTT has all these advantages, we've been talking about it in a very abstract way.
Right.
How does all this connect back to our everyday lives?
Okay.
Why should someone who's not a philosopher care about the revision theory of truth?
That's an important question.
Yeah.
I think there are some powerful takeaways from RTT that can help us all navigate the world of truth and information more effectively.
Okay.
The first one I would point to is that it highlights that truth can be a process, not just a destination.
So we shouldn't always expect to find one fixed final answer right away.
Exactly. Especially when dealing with complex issues or those self-referential statements that we talked about.
Right?
It's crucial to be open to revising our beliefs as we gather more information
Yep.
and engage in critical reflection.
I feel like it's a really valuable lesson in today's world,
Absolutely.
where we're just like bombarded with information from all sides.
It really is. And that leads into the second takeaway,
Okay.
which is about the importance of understanding the dynamics of our own reasoning.
Okay.
By modeling this process of revision, RTT actually gives us a framework for analyzing how our own beliefs about truth are shaped by various factors.
Mm-hmm.
Language context, even our own biases.
So it's like a tool for becoming more self-aware about how we arrive at our beliefs.
Exactly. And that kind of self-awareness can be incredibly valuable in any area where truth and justification are paramount.
Right.
Whether it's science, law, politics,
Even personal relationships.
even personal relationships, you got it.
Yeah. By understanding the process, we can become more critical and discerning about the claims that we encounter and the beliefs that we hold.
Precisely. Ultimately, that's what makes RTT so powerful. It
Right.
equips us to navigate this complex, ever-evolving landscape of truth
Yeah.
with greater clarity and insight.
I think we've done a really great job today of unpacking the core ideas of RTT.
I think so, too.
This has been a fascinating journey from that simple liar's paradox to exploring these like intricate revision sequences and these ordinal numbers.
It's a lot.
It is. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay.
Something to ponder as they continue their own exploration of truth.
I like it.
We've talked about how RTT helps us understand how we reason about truth.
Right.
But does it ultimately tell us what truth is?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's one that continues to spark debate among philosophers.
Of course.
RTT offers a powerful framework for analyzing truth,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't necessarily settle those deeper metaphysical questions about its fundamental nature.
Right. It's really up to each of us to grapple with those questions
Yeah.
and decide how our own views align with the insights of this theory. So we've given you the tools and the knowledge,
Right.
but the journey of understanding truth is ultimately a personal one.
It is, and it's full of exciting twists and turns.
Exactly. So keep questioning, keep exploring,
Yeah.
and keep revising your understanding of truth. That's what makes this whole deep dive so rewarding.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time for another adventure in knowledge.
See you then.